The call came 6 months after the divorce. Mr. Ambrose. The voice was careful. Cassie Morrison named you as the father. You need to come sign the papers. Caspian froze. Cassie, his ex-wife. Father of what exactly? Of a 3-month-old girl. The mother is in a coma after a car accident. No other relatives. You're all she has. The phone almost fell from his hand. Cassie had a daughter, and that daughter was his. And he didn't know. Then the memory hit like a punch. That last night before signing the papers, she had touched her stomach. He asked if she was okay, and she had lied. And he ended up letting her go.
Hi, my name is Rowan, and I'm the creator of this channel and all these stories. And right now on the screen, I'm showing you Deborah and Ebby's comments. Thank you so much for the support, guys. I do all of this for you. And before we continue, tell me, do you believe a person can truly change for love? Answer down below, and maybe your comment will show up in the next video.
Chapter 1. The Hospital and the Truth.
A daughter I didn't even know existed.
Caspian arrived at the hospital 2 hours after the call, and his $3,000 suit was drenched in sweat as if he'd run an entire marathon without stopping. His breathing wasn't coming right, and it had absolutely nothing to do with taking the stairs. The words spun in his head non-stop, one after another, making no sense whatsoever. Daughter, coma, Cassie. The social worker waited in the ICU hallway with that expression of professional compassion they probably taught in some mandatory course on how to deal with people in panic. "Mr. Ambrose?" she asked in a careful voice. "That's me." His voice came out too hoarse. "Where's the baby?" "In the nursery. She's healthy and perfect." Sarah, the social worker, began guiding him through hallways that seemed to have been designed to confuse anyone in a state of shock. "But Mr. Ambrose, you need to understand something important here. Cassie named you as the father in absolutely every possible document that exists in the universe. Birth certificate, will, emergency plan, pizza delivery contact if necessary. You're the legal guardian." Caspian stopped walking in the middle of the hallway and looked at her as if she'd just spoken in an alien language. "I didn't know she existed until literally an hour ago. How can I be the guardian of someone I found out exists between a meeting about corporate acquisition and the moment I spilled coffee on my shirt?" Sarah looked at the coffee stain still quite visible on the expensive fabric. "Well, the baby doesn't care much about spilled coffee, so there's that. And technically, legally speaking, you're her father, so..." She made a vague gesture with her hand that presumably meant something like, "Life happens, learn to deal with it." The nursery was surprisingly full of babies, which made perfect sense considering the name of the place, but Caspian could only see one. April Ambrose Morrison, said the pink card attached to the transparent crib. Born April 15th. Below, someone had written by hand in round, hopeful handwriting, "April's Miracle." She was absurdly small in a way that was probably completely normal for babies, but still terrifying for anyone holding one for the first time. Her hair was dark like his, her eyes were closed, and she was wrapped in that generic hospital blanket that seemed 3 times bigger than her tiny body. Perfect in a way that made something break completely in his chest, like a dam that held too much water for too long and finally gave way all at once. "Can I hold her?" The question came out hesitant, as if he were asking permission to hold a particularly delicate and dangerous explosive. The nurse, who had that tired air of someone who'd seen absolutely everything in this life and wasn't impressed by anything anymore, picked up April with the casual skill of someone who does this about 200 times a day and placed her in Caspian's arms without ceremony. "Support the head, that's it, just like that. Relax your shoulders, honey. You're not defending a doctoral thesis here. It's just a baby." "Just a baby," Caspian repeated to himself mentally, as he looked at the tiny creature that was apparently his responsibility now. Just a baby he had no idea how to care for. Just a baby whose mother was in a coma in a cold, impersonal hospital room. Just a baby who represented absolutely every wrong choice he'd made in the entire last year, all condensed into 3.5 pounds of vulnerable humanity. April opened her eyes at that exact moment, and they were green exactly like Cassie's, deep moss green with those golden flecks when the light hit at the right angle. She looked at Caspian with that intense and surprising seriousness that babies sometimes have, as if she were critically evaluating whether he passed the basic competency test to keep another human being alive. "Hi," he whispered, and his voice broke in a way that was probably pathetic, but he couldn't control. "Hi, April. I'm your dad, and I had no idea you existed, which makes me feel simultaneously the worst human being who ever walked this planet and completely furious with your mother for not telling me, but also perfectly understanding why she didn't tell me because I was a terrible husband and would probably be a terrible father." And he took a deep breath, realizing the absurdity. "I'm having an existential conversation with a 3-month-old baby. Great start to a father-daughter relationship." April yawned, tiny and devastatingly cute, completely disinterested in his existential crisis. Sarah appeared beside him again with that silent efficiency of an experienced social worker. "Want to see Cassie now?" The ICU was everything Caspian deeply hated about medical environments, only multiplied by 1,000 and amplified to the extreme. Too cold, full of machines that made irritating and arrhythmic noises every second, with that characteristic hospital smell that no cleaning product in the world can completely disguise. And in the middle of it all, small and too pale in the bed surrounded by technology on all sides, was Cassie. She looked fragile in a way he'd never seen in her before. Cassie had always been that person with absolutely tireless energy, always in constant motion, always creating something or laughing about something or passionately arguing about something that mattered to her. Seeing her completely still was wrong on such a fundamental level that it physically hurt. The purple bruises on her face made Caspian want to punch something hard, preferably the entire universe for allowing this to happen to her. "Taz, how long until she wakes up?" he asked the doctor, who was checking charts with an expression too neutral to be natural. The doctor hesitated in that specific way doctors do when the news is terribly bad, but they need to wrap everything first in technical and professional language. "Mr. Ambrose, your wife suffered severe head trauma in the accident. We're doing absolutely everything that's medically possible, and even some things that are on the edge of experimental science, but..." He paused significantly, and Caspian felt his stomach sink. "You should mentally prepare yourself for the very real possibility that she might not wake up." "No." The word came out much louder than was appropriate for a hospital environment, making a nurse across the hallway look with evident disapproval. Caspian lowered his tone but maintained all the firmness he could muster. "No, she will wake up. She has to wake up because this is non-negotiable. She has a daughter, a girl who was born in April and is apparently a medical miracle. She can't just not wake up and leave me here not knowing what to do." The doctor put his hand on his shoulder in that universal gesture of, "I completely understand your desperation, but medicine has well-defined limits," and discreetly left the room, leaving Caspian alone with unconscious Cassie and the irritating machines doing their methodical work. He sat in the uncomfortable chair beside her bed, taking her hand that was too cold to the touch. "Cass." He started using the nickname only he used, and that always made her smile in that specific way. "Cass, please wake up soon. I know technically we don't have anything between us anymore, except divorce papers signed months ago and a bunch of accumulated mutual resentment. But I really need you to wake up because I desperately need answers. Like, how the hell do I take care of a baby without accidentally killing the child? Why didn't you tell me about the pregnancy? And mainly," he felt his throat tighten painfully, "why did you think you had to do absolutely everything alone without giving me even a chance?" Complete silence, except for the machines continuing their monotonous and impersonal work. "We were happy in the beginning, remember?" He continued talking because apparently he was now having a completely one-sided therapy session with a person in a deep coma. "For our first date, you laughed so hard at my absolutely horrible joke about financial consulting that you spit red wine on the poor waiter. The wedding was small and quick because we didn't want to wait a single second, and because my mother would have turned the whole thing into a production worthy of Broadway if we let her get minimally involved. I truly loved you, Cass." He paused, processing his own words. "Still love, actually. Present tense, not dead and buried past. The words came out of his mouth and he realized with a shock that they were completely true, which was extremely inconvenient and complicated considering all the circumstances, but apparently that was exactly what was happening inside him. Then my mother started with those venomous insinuations, all carefully disguised as legitimate maternal concern. You don't have the right social background for our family. You'll distract Caspian from the really important work. You don't understand how our family has functioned for generations. And I, like the supreme idiot and emotional coward I've always been, let all of that get into my head like a particularly efficient and destructive virus. I started working more and more hours, staying home less and less, making you feel like you were less important than quarterly reports and investor meetings. He wiped his eyes that were uncomfortably wet. And you never complained directly about anything. You just kept getting quieter and quieter as the months passed, more distant every day, until that specific night when you finally said you couldn't take it anymore. That if I wasn't going to fight minimally for us, you weren't going to keep fighting alone forever. He remembered that night with painful and detailed clarity. Cassie standing in the kitchen wearing that old faded college t-shirt she always wore when she was especially sad, saying the words he simply hadn't taken seriously enough at the time. I signed the damn divorce papers the next day, like the emotional coward I am, without fighting at all, without trying to fix anything, because a pathetic and insecure part of me really thought you were right about all of it, that you genuinely deserved someone much better than an emotionally constipated workaholic with a massive inferiority complex disguised as impressive professional success. Caspian looked at her face, so still and bruised against the white hospital pillow. Cass, wake up soon, please. Let me at least try to fix everything I destroyed so completely. Let me finally be the man I should have been from the absolute beginning, the father April truly deserves to have, the husband you deserved, and that I was too incompetent and cowardly to be when it mattered. Her hand didn't move a single millimeter, but Caspian made a vow right there in that depressing ICU with bad coffee and absolutely horrible fluorescent lighting that he was going to figure out how to make everything work. Fix every broken piece and bring Cassie back to them. Even if it took forever, even if she woke up and still hated him with all the intensity he probably deserved, at least she'd be awake and alive. Flashback, 9 months ago. Cassie was in the kitchen when Caspian finally got home at 11 at night for the 5th consecutive time that week, with his tie crooked and exhaustion marked deeply in his eyes. "Did you eat anything today?" she asked without turning around, focused on washing a dish that was probably already completely clean 20 minutes ago. "I grabbed something at the office earlier." It was an obvious lie, and he knew she knew. He'd completely forgotten to eat again. The silence that followed was that heavy and suffocating type, loaded with absolutely all the unsaid things that had accumulated over months and months of growing distance. "Caspian," she finally turned to face him, and her hands were still wet from the sink. "When was the last time we had dinner together for real? That we had a real conversation that wasn't just about basic coexistence logistics, that you looked at me, like really truly looked at me, not just waved distractedly while reading another urgent email on your phone. I work so hard to build a better future for both of us." His defense sounded weak and empty, even to his own ears. "I don't want a hypothetical perfect future with an even bigger house and an even more expensive car, Caspian." She was crying now, completely silent tears running down her face that were infinitely worse than dramatic sobs. "I want you. Present here with me. Now, but your mother is right about at least one thing, isn't she? I'm just an inconvenient distraction. You'd be much more efficient, much more successful, much more everything without me here getting in the way all the time." "Cass, that's not how it works." "Then show me." She gave the final ultimatum with her voice breaking completely. "Choose once and for all. The work that literally consumes every hour of your day. Your family that treats me like a temporary annoying intruder. Your absolutely paralyzing fear of disappointing other people's impossible expectations. Or me, us, this thing we built." Caspian hesitated for exactly 2 seconds that were more than enough time to absolutely destroy everything. Cassie nodded slowly, wiping the tears with the back of her wet hand. "I understand the answer perfectly. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight, and tomorrow we'll talk calmly about the practical next steps of the divorce. Cass, wait just a second. No, Caspian. I'm tired of waiting infinitely for you. She laughed without any real humor. You just made crystal clear exactly where I am in the hierarchy of your life priorities, and full spoiler, I'm not even in the top 5 on the list. Then, back to the present. 2 weeks after the accident that changed everything, a man Caspian didn't know was standing at the ICU door, watching him with an expression that mixed evident disapproval, very poorly disguised anger, and something that might be reluctant pity. You're Caspian Ambrose? Definitely not a question. Last time I checked my identity, yes. Caspian rubbed his tired face, trying to look at least minimally functional and presentable. Oh, and you would be, who exactly? Vesper Webb, Cassie's personal attorney and also her close friend for years, which automatically means I have extremely strong and negative opinions about you specifically. He entered the room with that natural and irritating confidence of a very successful lawyer, closing the door behind him with a definitive click. I came to personally bring the letter she left specifically for you, in case something absolutely horrible happened to her, like exactly what just happened now. He threw a thick envelope in Caspian's direction with much more force than strictly necessary, making his hostility very clear. You hurt her in an absolutely spectacular and devastating way, Vesper said with that clinical coldness of an experienced lawyer. She cried for literally entire months without stopping, rebuilt her entire life completely alone while she was pregnant, constantly nauseous, completely terrified and totally alone. And you know why she did all of that without telling you absolutely anything? Because she had too much pride to be just your inconvenient moral obligation, because she didn't want you to stay out of superficial pity or basic social responsibility. Caspian felt every word like a precisely placed stab. I would have stayed if I'd known the truth. I would have dropped absolutely everything. Would you really? Vesper crossed his arms, deeply skeptical. Or would you have done exactly what you always did throughout the entire marriage, chosen the important work, your manipulative and toxic mother, anything else in the universe except her? Because based purely on your documented track record, Caspian, all the concrete evidence isn't exactly in your favor here. He was completely right, which was extremely irritating but completely undeniable. Caspian opened the envelope with his hands trembling slightly and uncontrollably. Cassie's handwriting was painfully familiar, those round and careful curves she'd always had, and seeing the words written by her own hand made his chest tighten until it was almost impossible to breathe. The letter was there, real and devastating, waiting to be read. And then he began to read. Caspian, if you're reading this now, it means something very bad happened to me and that April desperately needs you. First, take a deep breath. I know you're going into total panic, because panic is literally your automatic default reaction when you don't have absolute control of a situation. Second, April is your daughter, completely yours, indisputably yours. I did a paternity test because I'm too obsessively organized and wanted to have all the perfect documentation stored away. I didn't tell you about her because I was absolutely terrified, Caspian, with paralyzing fear that you'd stay only out of moral obligation and not out of true love. Terrible fear that your family would cruelly reject her like they rejected me from day one. Deep fear that April would grow up feeling she was an unwanted burden that ruined everyone's life around her. But she's your daughter by blood and deserves to know her own father, even if the father is an emotionally repressed workaholic with serious, completely unresolved family issues. I named her April because she was born exactly on April 15th, during an absolutely absurd storm that knocked out the entire hospital's power for hours. All the medical odds and statistics said I would never be able to get pregnant naturally because of fertility issues. But she came anyway, right in the middle of complete chaos, absolutely perfect. My personal April miracle. If April is reading this when she's older, your father truly loved me, sweetheart. I loved him back with absolutely everything I had inside me. Sometimes love simply isn't enough, when there's too much fear taking up too much space between people. Caspian, if you're still reading this far, April has exactly your eyes when she's thoughtful about something, Your identical crooked smile when she's about to do something mischievous, your impressive stubbornness when she decides she definitely doesn't want to sleep. She's absolutely perfect, and I know for sure you'll love her in a way you couldn't love me completely. Protect her from everything, Caspian. From absolutely everything, especially from the fear that destroyed both of us so completely. With love that continues to exist stubbornly even when it shouldn't anymore, Cassie P.S. If your mother tries to get involved in April's upbringing, without first apologizing very sincerely to me, even if I'm in a coma or dead, I solemnly swear I will haunt you forever. Caspian finished reading with tears completely blurred on the page, his hands still shaking uncontrollably. Vesper had left in respectful silence at some point during the reading, leaving him completely alone with the devastating letter and the absolutely crushing weight of everything he'd irreparably lost and everything he now had the sacred responsibility to protect. He looked long at Cassie lying in bed, connected to all those machines keeping her alive, so far away but technically still there with him. "I truly loved you, Cass," he whispered to the completely empty room. "I still love you deeply. Always loved you from the first moment. I was just too incompetent and cowardly to show it, right when it mattered. But Cassie, I'm going to prove it now to you. To April, to myself too. I'm going to be exactly the man you described in that letter with so much hope. The man who protects the people he loves. The one who finally chooses right. The one who finally truly learned what really matters in this life." He held her cold hand with infinite care. "Starting exactly right now, Cass. Starting now."
Just imagine finding out you have a child, out of absolutely nowhere. To be honest with you, our protagonist actually reacted pretty well given the shock of the situation, don't you think?
Chapter 2. Learning to be a father.
What if loving her isn't enough if I fail anyway?
Caspian's first full week as an absolutely solo father was exactly what he imagined an active war zone looked like, except with significantly more dirty diapers and considerably less sleep than would be considered safe to operate heavy machinery or make minimally important financial decisions. April cried non-stop. Caspian cried along with her. Neither of them had the slightest idea what they were doing there, but at least April had the perfect excuse of being literally a 3-month-old baby. Adele Torres, experienced hospital nurse and Cassie's loyal best friend since college days, finally took pity on him on the 3rd day when she found him wandering through the nursery hallway with the devastated appearance of a zombie apocalypse survivor refugee. "Guys, you're holding her like she's a bomb about to explode any second," she observed in that direct and no-nonsense nurse tone that definitely doesn't have time available for unnecessary drama. She could be a bomb. Caspian looked at April, nestled in his arms with deep suspicion. "How do I know with absolute certainty that she's not?" "Because bombs don't poop regularly, Caspian. Babies do. Relax your arms right now. Babies feel all the muscle tension from adults and get even more agitated because of it. You're literally creating a vicious cycle of mutual panic." Adele spent the next few days teaching Caspian absolutely everything about basic newborn baby maintenance, with the impressive patience of a saint and the sharply sarcastic comments of a completely normal person. Changing diapers wasn't exactly complex rocket science, she insisted repeatedly, while Caspian struggled with the side tabs that definitely had some personal vendetta against him specifically. Bottles had a very specific and crucial temperature, not too hot that it would burn the delicate mouth, not too cold that April would reject it like she was personally offended as a food critic. Putting her to sleep was an extremely complex art, involving absolutely perfect timing, precisely right environment, and apparently some kind of ritualistic sacrifice to the mysterious gods of infant sleep. "You're doing this completely wrong again," Adele said for the 50th time that week, when she caught Caspian trying to rock April from side to side as if he were literally mixing a sophisticated cocktail at an elegant party. "Father, there are so many different ways to do everything wrong," Caspian protested in the voice of someone too exhausted to maintain any remaining dignity. "I urgently need a detailed manual with an organized alphabetical index and extremely detailed technical diagrams. The manual is the paternal instinct that exists inside you. You have that naturally. Apparently, I don't have any instinct at all." Caspian looked at April, who was making that specific little face that always foreshadowed an absolutely imminent cry. I only have constant existential terror and excessive caffeine circulating in my system. Even so, it works perfectly well. Adele carefully picked up April, demonstrating for the 100th time how to hold a baby correctly without looking like a stuck robot. Look here, Caspian. Cassie trusted you with the most precious and important life she had. That means something profound. It means she knew perfectly well that you had all of this inside you, even though you clearly don't know it yet. The words stuck in his head for the rest of the day. At night, when April finally slept deeply after an absolutely epic battle involving 3 failed bottle attempts and a complete change of clothes because babies apparently had impressive military precision for spitting up milk at physically impossible angles, Caspian religiously went to the hospital. He sat patiently with unconscious Cassie, told her everything about the entire day, about every little thing related to April. So she held her head up by herself today for almost 5 full seconds. He reported, as if it were an achievement worthy of an Olympic gold medal. Adele said it's pretty early for that specific developmental milestone, that April is too strong, like you always were. He paused and clearing his throat. I also almost dropped her today. Like, I didn't literally drop her on the floor with impact, just almost. I managed to catch her at the last available second. It was absolutely terrifying. I gave myself a 0 out of 10 rating as a responsible father, but Adele said all new parents almost drop their babies eventually at some point, so apparently I'm within the statistically acceptable normal range. Cassie didn't respond at all, but Caspian kept talking non-stop because the heavy silence was infinitely worse than one-sided monologues. Your mother called today. He quickly corrected himself. My mother, I mean, Betty Ambrose herself, calling directly on my cell phone. She heard about April's existence through that sophisticated gossip network that apparently exists among wealthy women of a certain age and specific social circle. She wants to meet her granddaughter immediately. I said, and you're going to be genuinely proud of this, Cass. He leaned imperceptibly closer to the bed. I said, no. Very direct and clear. No diplomatic detours. I told her that until she apologizes sincerely to you, face to face, even though you're technically in a coma and unable to formally accept or reject apologies, she absolutely does not meet April in any way. First real boundary I've established with her in literally my entire adult life. It was a small but extremely important victory. 2 full weeks after the accident that changed everything, Dr. Richardson called Caspian for a private conversation that clearly wouldn't be about good news based purely on his serious facial expression. Mr. Ambrose, the doctor said with that careful professional gentleness that doctors always use to give devastating bad news, we need to honestly discuss the realistic options about Cassie's current condition. What options exactly? Caspian immediately crossed his arms, completely defensive posture. The doctor hesitated in that specific way people do when they're going to suggest something absolutely horrible that nobody wants to hear. She's not showing any significant improvement in recent days. The brain swelling is slowly decreasing, but neural activity remains worryingly minimal. Perhaps it's the appropriate time to seriously consider, he paused significantly and painfully, discontinuing artificial life support. No. The word exploded too loud, echoing through the empty hallway and making 2 nurses look with concern. Caspian forced his tone down, but maintained all the unwavering firmness. Absolutely not in any way. She will wake up eventually. She just needs more adequate time. It's already been 2 full weeks, Mr. Ambrose. Then give her 2 more weeks, or 20 more if necessary, or however many she needs until she wakes up. I'll pay absolutely any financial cost involved. I'll sell my entire company if it's really necessary. Just don't give up on her now. Dr. Richardson sighed deeply the way experienced doctors do when they know perfectly well they're fighting a completely lost battle against stubborn and irrational hope. 2 additional weeks then. After that, we'll re-evaluate the situation with a complete and detailed neurological scan. Deal? Deal, Caspian agreed immediately, feeling temporary relief invade his tense body. Adele found him in the cold hallway shortly after, where he was staring fixedly through the wide window into the ICU with a completely cold cup of coffee in hand that he'd completely forgotten to drink. "Do you really truly believe she's going to wake up?" "I have to believe that," he responded, without being able to take his eyes off Cassie, lying so still. "Because the horrible alternative is April growing up without a biological mother, and I simply can't process that specific reality without having an absolutely complete existential crisis." Adele stayed silent for a long, heavy moment. "Cassie told me absolutely everything about you two, about the terrible divorce, about how you let your family slowly destroy your marriage like constant emotional erosion. I know perfectly well." Caspian finally looked at her. "I'm completely aware of my catastrophic relational incompetence, but she also said something important," Adele continued in a soft voice, "that you were a genuinely good man deep down, just too lost, deeply scared of not being enough for her. She still loved you a lot, Caspian, even after signing all the official papers, even pregnant and completely alone facing everything, still loved you." The words hurt precisely because they were simultaneously comforting and absolutely terrible. Then why didn't she tell me about April, if she still loved me so much? Because love alone isn't enough when there's fear taking up too much space between people. Adele touched his arm gently. "Cassie had paralyzing fear that you'd stay only out of basic moral obligation. That April would feel her whole life that she was a heavy anchor, tying you to a life you never truly wanted. She grew up exactly like that, you know, with parents who stayed together miserably for the child, but deeply hated each other. She lived in a house completely full of resentment, carefully disguised as parental responsibility. She didn't want that in any way for her own daughter. So she deliberately chose to suffer completely alone. Raise April entirely by herself." Caspian felt anger and understanding mixing confusingly inside him. She chose to protect April from the devastating possibility of eventual rejection, even if it cost absolutely everything she had. Adele wiped away a discreet tear. "Caspian, if Cassie wakes up, and I say if because medical realism is important here, please don't waste this chance. Show her that love can be genuinely enough when you finally stop letting fear make all the important decisions." "I will," he promised with absolute sincerity, "in every humanly possible way." Exactly 3 weeks after the accident that turned everything upside down, Caspian was giving April a warm bottle at 3 in the morning, half asleep and half awake in that permanent zombie state that new parents constantly inhabit. When the phone rang with a crash that almost made him drop the baby in fright, it was the hospital. His heart literally stopped completely. "Mr. Ambrose?" The nurse's voice was surprisingly cheerful, in a way completely unusual for 3 in the morning. "Cassie just woke up." Caspian left April with Adele, who miraculously now had a key to his apartment specifically for emergencies exactly like this, and ran desperately to the hospital still dressed in wrinkled pajamas because personal vanity was completely irrelevant when his ex-wife had just woken up from a 3-week coma. Cassie was conscious but visibly confused, her green eyes open but completely disoriented, the breathing tube already removed, leaving a red and irritated mark on her delicate throat. She saw Caspian rushing in and froze completely in place. "Caspian." Her voice was too hoarse from prolonged disuse. "Hi, Cass." He tried to smile, but it probably looked more like a nervous and strange grimace. "What happened to me? Where am I exactly? Why am I in a hospital?" She looked around the ICU with growing and evident panic. "Serious car accident, 3 weeks ago now. You were in an induced coma, but now you're finally awake, which is an extremely positive and encouraging development." 3 whole weeks. Cassie tried to sit up abruptly, making all the connected machines beep irritably in protest. "April. Where's April now? Is she okay? Is she safe?" Absolute and total panic. "Safe with me." "She's absolutely perfect, Cassie," Caspian quickly assured, approaching the bed. "Healthy, growing normally, hitting all the developmental milestones at the expected time, according to Adele, who's become my unofficial medical consultant specialist." Tears began to fall from her eyes without control. "You know everything about her existing." "I do know. I found out exactly when the hospital called, naming me as biological father and official legal guardian. which was an absolutely surprising revelation considering I didn't know anything about pregnancy, birth, or daughter's existence until I got that call while sitting in a tedious meeting about diversified investment portfolio. Cassie turned her face to the side, completely unable to look directly at him. I didn't want you to find out like this. Not in this horrible way. Why didn't you tell me before? The question came out significantly more hurt than he'd intended. Because... She closed her eyes tightly, tears continuing to fall freely. I didn't want you staying only out of basic moral obligation. I didn't want to be the inconvenient and pregnant ex-wife who ruined your newly divorced bachelor life completely. I didn't want April growing up knowing she was the main reason her parents were stuck together miserably and unhappily. I would have stayed out of true love, Cassie, not out of social obligation. Would you really? She finally looked directly at him with raw and visible pain. Or would you have stayed because your moral conscience told you to, because it's socially expected and correct? Caspian, I didn't want to be your heavy moral responsibility in any way. I wanted to be your conscious and active choice. You are my choice, Cass. You always have been from the beginning. I was just too incompetent and cowardly to demonstrate it adequately. Cassie closed her eyes again, deep exhaustion taking over. I'm extremely tired now. I urgently need to sleep. Of course, rest plenty. We'll talk later more calmly about everything. He started to move away toward the door. But before he reached the door completely, she reached out and grabbed his hand, weak but determined. Thank you, Caspian, for taking care of her when I couldn't be there. Always, Cass, he promised with complete and total sincerity. I'll always protect April. And you too.
This was one of the most emotional chapters I've ever written, but the truth is that the big emotions in this story aren't over yet.
Chapter 3. Rebuilding trust, slowly.
Trust doesn't come back just because you say you've changed.
I know.
Cassie was discharged a week later with an impressive list of detailed medical instructions, physical therapy scheduled 3 times a week, and that extremely determined look of someone who absolutely wouldn't accept being treated like a fragile invalid. Caspian organized absolutely everything with the efficiency he normally reserved for complicated corporate acquisitions. A qualified part-time nurse, specialized recovery equipment, the apartment completely reorganized for maximum accessibility in every room. I don't need your charity, Caspian, Cassie protested, when she saw all the apparatus set up waiting for her. It's not charity at all. It's functional and practical co-parenting. April needs a completely healthy mother. Therefore, the direct investment in your physical recovery is a simultaneous investment in our daughter's well-being. It's absolutely irrefutable logic. You literally turned basic human care into a business strategy. Impressive even for you. It's a natural talent, he admitted, with an almost discreet smile. The first full day at home was strangely quiet, despite having a baby present occupying space. Cassie held April in her arms and cried for what seemed like hours, but was probably only 20 long minutes. She just held her tight and cried, while April looked at her with that intense seriousness characteristic of babies. I missed 3 whole weeks, Cassie finally whispered in a broken voice. 3 weeks I'll never get back in any way. Her first sounds, the first time she really focused on someone's eyes. Everything was with you instead of me. But you're here alive now, Caspian offered, feeling his total inadequacy for genuine emotional comfort. That's exactly what truly matters. And April won't remember these 3 lost weeks, but she'll remember her whole entire life with you present beside her. Cassie nodded slowly, carefully wiping her tears, turning all her attention to April, who had strategically decided that this emotional moment was the absolutely perfect time to spit up milk on Cassie's recently recovered shoulder. Officially welcome back to the world of motherhood, Caspian commented with light humor, grabbing a clean towel. The next few days were too delicate, like carefully dancing around furniture in a completely dark room. Caspian constantly helped with April, with the house, with Cassie's progressive recovery, and slowly, very carefully, they talked about everything, about the painful divorce, about the hidden pregnancy, about all the heavy silences and misunderstandings accumulated over months. First, I found out I was pregnant exactly 1 week before signing the official papers. Cassie admitted one night, while April slept peacefully between them on the couch like a completely neutral Switzerland reference. I wanted to tell you immediately, but then I remembered absolutely everything. How your mother constantly looked at me like an unwanted alien invader. How you always chose work when there was any schedule conflict. How I felt completely invisible in your life despite technically being your legal wife. Cass, and I thought clearly, she continued, and her voice broke slightly. If I tell him now, you'll obviously stay with me, but not truly for me. Out of basic moral responsibility, April would grow up feeling her whole life that she broke our marriage, that she was an unwanted anchor. I didn't want that horrible weight for her to carry. Our marriage was already broken before, Cass, because of my failure. Our failure, Cassie gently corrected. I also could have communicated everything better, fought more openly, but I was so afraid of not being enough for you. Of you waking up one day and realizing you deserved someone from your social level, like your mother repeatedly suggested with Venom. My social level is extremely overrated and full of absolutely terrible people. A comfortable silence settled between them. Then Cassie asked the question that had clearly been on her mind for days. Does Betty know about April existing? She does. Adele mentioned that the elite gossip network works with absolutely impressive efficiency. She wants to meet her granddaughter immediately. And you said what exactly? I said no, completely. Without any hesitation, I clearly said that until she apologizes to you personally, face to face, with genuine sincerity and not just empty words of social etiquette. She has no access to April. Cassie looked at him with complete and total surprise. You really said that? To Betty Ambrose, the woman you never contradicted in your entire adult life. There's a first time for everything in life, and I finally realized something extremely important. The choices I made before were wrong. I let my mother, my work, my pathological fear of disappointing impossible expectations control absolutely everything, but not anymore. Now I choose you two. You and April. Always. Without any hesitation. Tears shone in her eyes. Caspian, you don't need to win me back now or ever. You just need to let me prove consistently and without unnecessary drama that you've fundamentally changed as a person. Okay, she whispered softly. But slowly, one extremely cautious day at a time. One day at a time, he agreed, feeling something that could be true hope if he allowed optimistic feelings. 2 full months after the terrible accident, life had found a strange but surprisingly functional rhythm. Cassie was strong again, April was growing absurdly fast, and they were something indefinable. Not a couple, not strangers. A family carefully reassembled with emotional glue and a lot of conscious effort. Until Betty Ambrose showed up without any prior warning, because obviously she would do exactly that. Caspian, I need to urgently talk about this whole situation, she announced at the door as if she were starting a formal board meeting. He didn't invite her in, physically blocking the entrance. Situation? You mean my daughter and her mother? About your inadequate ex-wife and this child who, she paused delicately with disguised venom, complicates everything considerably. Stop right now, Caspian said with a coldness that made Betty blink in surprise. April doesn't complicate anything. April is my daughter and absolute #1 priority, and Cassie isn't inadequate in any way. She's an incredible mother, a talented person, and the woman I loved, still love, and you have no right whatsoever to judge them. Caspian, be reasonable. You can't really be considering going back to her. Why not exactly? Because she doesn't have an impressive last name. Because she works as a freelance designer instead of managing a performative charity foundation. Because she makes me genuinely happy in a way that money and social approval never did. You're throwing everything away for her, Betty said, with completely clear disdain. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing right for the first time in my life. Caspian firmly crossed his arms. Mum, you have a very simple choice. Sincere apology to Cassie, personally without any condescension, or you never meet April. There's no possible negotiation. You're not serious. Completely serious. Test it if you want. Betty turned visibly red with contained anger, turned abruptly and left without another word. Cassie had heard absolutely everything from the living room, holding April, who was happily ignorant of the adult drama happening. "You didn't need to do that for me," she said when Caspian came back inside. "I did need to. I should have done it literally years ago." He sat beside her on the couch. "Cassie, I won't let anyone, not even my mother with a massive superiority complex, make you feel inferior. Never again." She didn't respond verbally, but the way she looked at him changed visibly, softened completely, as if something that had been tense for too long finally relaxed a bit. Maybe, just maybe, hope was a real possibility. Chapter 4. The Almost. 4 full months after the accident that changed everything,
What if this is our second chance and we're too afraid to take it?
life had found a precarious balance that worked surprisingly well, considering all the complicated circumstances. Cassie was completely physically recovered. April was 7 months old and starting to sit up by herself with that stubborn determination she'd clearly inherited from both parents. And Caspian was living in a permanent state of emotional confusion, carefully disguised as functional competence. They lived together in the same apartment, technically for practical convenience, which is what Cassie always insisted whenever anyone asked directly. They divided the responsibilities with April with an efficiency that would make professional organizational consultants cry with genuine joy. They had dinner together almost every night without exception, talked about absolutely everything from complicated international politics to the best brand of diapers available on the market, laughed at inside jokes they'd naturally developed over the months of living together. But they weren't a real couple. Definitely not. Absolutely not at all. Until that specific night that changed absolutely everything in an inconvenient way. April was finally sleeping deeply after an absolutely epic battle against sleep that had lasted a full 45 minutes and had involved 3 different music changes, 2 strategic position changes, and a truly impressive amount of pure infant determination. Caspian and Cassie collapsed on the couch simultaneously, exhausted in a way that only parents of small babies can truly understand. They were watching a movie that neither of them was really paying attention to, their shoulders naturally touching like they'd started doing without consciously noticing in recent weeks. "Caspian," Cassie said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them, "I need to tell you something that's been on my mind for days." That sounds like the beginning of a serious conversation. He paused the movie that was already confusing anyway. "What?" "I'm thinking about going back to work officially. Part-time, initially only. Adele offered to help with April during the hours, and I have an important client wanting new designs." She was talking too fast, visibly nervous. "But this means less time here at the apartment, with you. And I've gotten used to this in a worrying way, to this whole routine, to us doing things together, to you being the first person I see in the morning and the last at night." Caspian felt his heart accelerate in a medically interesting way. "I've also gotten very used to it, like worryingly so for someone who's supposedly just platonically co-parenting." Cassie turned completely to look directly at him, those intense green eyes fixed on him. "Caspian, what are we exactly? Really? Because I can't pretend I know the answer anymore. Honestly," he took a deep breath, processing, "I don't know how to define it for sure. I want to say we're a family, which is completely true, but it's infinitely more complicated than that. At least for me, it's infinitely more complicated." "For me too," she admitted quietly. "Much more complicated than I can express." "So," Caspian leaned imperceptibly closer, testing the boundaries, "can we stop pretending it's simple? Can we honestly admit it's complicated and see what happens after?" "Like what exactly?" "Like this." And he kissed her carefully. It was soft initially, hesitant like a question being asked through a physical action. It was the first time they'd kissed in over a full year, and Caspian felt every cell in his body wake up simultaneously, remembering exactly why he'd fallen in love with her originally. Cassie responded for exactly 3 wonderful seconds before pulling away abruptly, putting considerable physical distance between them on the couch. "We can't do this," she said with irregular breathing. "Why not?" "Because if it doesn't work out this time, April loses all the stability we've built. We lose the functional dynamic we took months to carefully build. And she paused, and her voice broke slightly, don't know if I can risk myself like that emotionally again. Caspian, you hurt me very deeply. She was crying now, silent tears falling. And I know you've changed completely. I see the concrete evidence every day. In the careful way you take care of April. In the firm way you've established necessary boundaries with your mother. In the respectful way you treat me as an equal instead of a pretty inconvenience. But the fear doesn't just disappear simply because I rationally know you're different now. The words cut precisely because they were brutally honest. What if I promise with total sincerity that I'll never hurt you again? You promised before, Caspian, in our marriage, the traditional vows about loving and honoring, and you still hurt me deeply, unintentionally maybe, but you hurt me devastatingly. Caspian pulled back physically, completely respecting her space. Okay, no pressure at all, I promise. But Cassie, he met her eyes directly, I'm truly here. I'll continue being here. Doesn't matter how long you need to process everything. Doesn't matter if you eventually decide you never want to risk it again. I'll be present for you and April, always. Cassie nodded slowly, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Thank you for understanding, for not pressuring. They went to sleep in separate rooms like they always routinely did, but Caspian stayed awake until dawn, staring fixedly at the ceiling, obsessively thinking about how he'd almost had everything back and how he could still permanently lose it if he wasn't extremely careful. The following week was strangely tense considering they'd lived comfortably together for months without problems. Cassie was polite, but visibly distant, creating considerable emotional space even when they were physically close taking care of April together. Caspian tried to give her the space she clearly needed, while simultaneously wanting to discuss absolutely everything openly, like functional adults. Did I do something wrong besides the obviously poorly calculated kiss? He finally asked one morning, while they were making coffee in an uncomfortable silence. No. She didn't look directly at him, focused on preparing April's bottle with unnecessary precision, just thinking a lot about everything. Thinking about what specifically? About whether I should move to another place with April. Give us real space to both have the necessary mental clarity. She finally looked at him seriously. To figure out what we really want without all the confusion of convenience and physical proximity. Caspian's heart literally stopped completely. You want to leave? I don't really want to, Cassie admitted in a small voice. But maybe it's necessary to do it. For everyone involved's emotional health. Cassie, please don't run from this important conversation. He approached cautiously. If it's about the kiss, we can completely forget it. Pretend it never happened. Go back to the functional normal we had before. It's not just about the kiss. She was crying again, which was happening with worrying frequency lately. It's about me desperately wanting it to happen again and again. And being absolutely terrified because the last time I gave myself emotionally like that to you, I was destroyed for months until there was nothing left but pure pain. I'm not going to destroy you again. That's a promise. How can I know for sure? How can I trust? You can't know, Caspian was brutally honest. There's no guarantee at all. But Cassie, love has always been a risk from the beginning. Relationships are inherently risky by nature, and I want to take this specific risk. With you, I always wanted to from the start. I was just too cowardly and confused to admit it before. But I'm so scared, she whispered softly. I'm also constantly scared of everything. He gently took her hands, giving her the complete chance to pull away if she wanted. I'm scared of not being good enough, of failing you again in a spectacular way. Of April growing up and realizing I destroyed the chance of a functional family. But I'm much more scared of not truly trying, of letting fear and past trauma steal the possibility of a future we both want but are terrified to reach for. Cassie looked at him long and deeply, as if she were searching for some lie or falsehood and finding nothing but honest vulnerability. Okay, she finally whispered. Let's really try. But slowly, absurdly, painfully slowly. It can be slow, that's fine, it's perfect for me. But Caspian, she said with absolute seriousness, If you hurt me again, if you choose work or your mother or anything else besides us when it truly matters, it's over, permanently. No third chances, understand? I understand completely, and I won't hurt you. I promise with everything I am. He kissed her again, and this time Cassie didn't pull away at all. She responded with an intensity that clearly indicated months of emotional restraint, finally being released all at once. They stayed there on the couch, completely intertwined, kissing like lovesick teenagers, until April woke up crying, demanding attention with perfectly terrible baby timing. She has absolutely impressive timing, Caspian commented, reluctant to let go of Cassie. It's an innate talent, Cassie agreed, smiling genuinely for the first time in an entire week. And for the first time in a long time, Caspian felt a true and grounded hope that maybe, possibly, against all unlikely odds, they could make everything work this time.
See, I told you the emotions in this story weren't over yet, and now comes an ending that I bet you're going to love.
Chapter 5. The Choice, Again. 6 months later, a full year since the divorce that had seemed so final but clearly wasn't, Cassie and Caspian were officially together now, navigating the relationship with the extreme care of people who knew exactly how fragile happiness could be. April was a full year old, walking wobbly around the house with impressive determination, speaking words that were 60% identifiable and 40% a completely invented language, perfect in every measurable way possible. And everything was working surprisingly well, which naturally meant something was going to complicate things, because the universe had an absolutely questionable sense of humor. The proposal arrived on a regular Tuesday through a corporate email with a subject line that made Caspian temporarily stop breathing. Europe Opportunity, Ambrose Capital Expansion. He read it 3 times in a row, carefully processing each word. It was a massive opportunity he'd been professionally dreaming about for entire years. Expand the company to the European market, establish a solid presence in London and Paris, potentially double the size and influence of Ambrose Capital in 2 years. But it meant relocation to London. For a minimum of 2 years, possibly 3. It meant leaving Cassie and April behind, or asking them to abandon their entire life here to follow him across the ocean. It meant a choice. Again, exactly the kind of choice that had destroyed everything the first time. He closed the laptop with more force than necessary, startling Vesper, who was sitting across the table from him at a cafe where they'd met for a business lunch. "You look like you just saw news of imminent death," Vesper observed, biting into his sandwich. "What happened?" "I got an offer," Caspian explained briefly, watching Vesper's expression quickly change from curiosity to something like genuine concern. "And you're going to accept it?" "I don't know yet." He ran his hand through his hair. "It's exactly the kind of opportunity I built my entire career waiting for, but it's also exactly the kind of choice that completely destroyed my marriage." Vesper put his sandwich back on the plate, getting serious. "Caspian, I'm going to be honest as your friend and occasional lawyer. You have a well-documented historical pattern of choosing professional ambition over the people you love. It worked magnificently for your career. It completely destroyed your personal life. So the question you need to ask is, which version of success do you really want this time?" The words stuck in his head for the rest of the day, while he pretended to work, but was actually staring at the proposal like it was an impossible puzzle. That night, after putting April to sleep with the elaborate ritual they'd perfected over months, Caspian found Cassie on the couch with her laptop, working on a design for a client. "I need to show you something important," he said, sitting beside her. He showed her the complete proposal, watched her read, her expression gradually becoming paler. "This is professionally amazing," she finally said in a carefully neutral voice, "like the ultimate career opportunity." "It is. You should accept it." The words came out forced but sincere. "I'm not going to accept it," Caspian said immediately, surprising them both with the speed of the decision. "Why?" Cassie turned to look directly at him, visibly confused. "This is literally everything you've worked years to achieve." "Because it means leaving you and April for entire years, and I've made this choice once before. I chose career, ambition, external expectations. the fear of disappointing people who didn't even really matter. I chose catastrophically wrong. He grabbed the proposal, methodically tearing it into small pieces with therapeutic satisfaction. I'm not going to repeat the same mistake. Not when I finally understand what really matters. Cassie was crying, but smiling too in a confused way. Caspian, are you absolutely sure? This is huge. I don't want to be the reason you have resentment 10 years from now. I'll never have resentment. He pulled her into a tight hug. Cassie, I spent the entire year proving I've fundamentally changed, that I choose you and April above everything. This, he gestured to the paper pieces on the table, is just one more proof in a long series of proofs. Europe can wait, or it might never happen. But this, he pointed between them, then toward the room where April slept. This is irreplaceable. I don't want business dinners in London. I want family dinners here. I don't want corporate success alone. I want an ordinary, wonderful life with you two. I love you, Cassie whispered against his chest. Still, again, I always loved you even when I was desperately trying not to. I love you. I always loved you, even when I was being an emotional idiot about it. They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other while the pieces of the proposal lay forgotten on the table. Eventually, Cassie pulled back slightly, looking at him with a strange expression he couldn't completely interpret. Caspian, she said slowly, I have an important question. Anything. Do you want to marry me? Again? He blinked, processing. Are you proposing to me? I am. Without an expensive ring because I spent the money on diapers and design equipment. Without an elaborate plan because planning isn't my strength. Just an honest question. She smiled nervously. Do you want to try again? Do it right this time. Build the life we both really want instead of the life we thought we should want. Yes, Caspian responded immediately, without any hesitation. Obviously yes, 1,000 times yes. I'd literally marry you at the courthouse in pajamas tomorrow morning if you wanted. She laughed, a genuine and relieved sound. How about next week? A small garden? Just us, April as an involuntary witness, Adele and Vesper and nobody else. Perfect, absolutely perfect. The wedding was deliberately simple, the total opposite of the first time. A small garden rented for an hour, 10 people, including the officiant and photographer. April wearing a yellow dress and being carried by Adele because she was more interested in chewing her own shoes than paying attention to the ceremony. But the vows were different, important. Real in a way the first time hadn't been completely. Caspian began with a surprisingly steady voice considering the obvious tears. The first time I married you, I promised to love and honor. Traditional words that sounded right but were empty because I didn't understand what they truly meant. Today I promise something more specific and fundamental. To choose. Choose you in every big and small decision. Choose April and the family we've built. Choose being present over being professionally successful. Choose vulnerability over emotional protection. I promise that when Europe or any shiny opportunity appears again, and it probably will, my answer will always be, not without you. Caspian, Cassie responded with a trembling but clear voice. The first time I married you, I was so scared. Scared of not being enough, of being abandoned, of confirming all the insecurities your family planted. Today I promise something different, not letting fear win. Actively fighting for us even when it's difficult and uncomfortable, communicating needs instead of assuming you should guess, trusting that the changes I see in you are real and permanent, not a temporary performance. I promise that when I'm scared, and I probably will be because trauma doesn't completely disappear, I'll speak instead of running. They exchanged the simple rings they'd chosen together, without drama or external pressure. They kissed when the officiant gave permission. April chose that exact moment to yell, "Dada!" loud enough to startle the nearby birds, and everyone laughed because it was perfect in a chaotic way. It was small and simple, and completely unimpressive by the social standards Betty Ambrose would measure by. But it was theirs. Honest, real. Built on a foundation of conscious choices instead of external expectations. April finally asleep after an eventful day. Caspian and Cassie collapsed on the couch with their new rings reflecting the soft light. Cassie. Thank you for giving me the second chance I definitely didn't initially deserve. For letting me prove that people can fundamentally change when the motivation is strong enough. For choosing to risk your heart again. Thank you for being worthy of the risk eventually, she responded, resting her head on his shoulder. Caspian, do you think it'll work this time? Statistically, second marriages have an even higher failure rate than first ones. It'll work, he said with conviction. Because this time we both know exactly what matters. We won't forget. I'll never forget again. I'd promise. Yes, totally yes. And the promise was kept. Not because it was easy or without challenges, because relationships never are. They had fights about the division of household chores and the monthly budget and decisions about April's education. They had moments of doubt when old fears resurfaced inconveniently. But every time, without exception, they chose each other. April, the family they deliberately built. Betty Ambrose eventually showed up with a formal and stiff apology that was probably torture for her to articulate, and gained supervised access to April once a month with strict rules about permitted comments. Vesper sent a wedding gift with a card saying, "Congratulations on finally getting it right, idiot," that Caspian proudly put on the fridge. Adele became April's official godmother and a constant presence in their lives, providing unsolicited medical advice and sarcastic comments in equal measure. And April grew up in a home full of love that was conscious and active, not just a passive feeling. She grew up knowing that Daddy had made mistakes but worked hard to fix them, that Mommy had been brave enough to risk again. That family was a daily choice, not an inevitable obligation. Years later, when April asked how they'd reconnected, Caspian told the complete truth about the divorce, about the coma, about not knowing she existed, about learning that love was a verb, not a noun. And April, wise beyond her years, said something Cassie and Caspian never forgot. Sometimes people need to get completely lost before they truly find themselves. She was right, because Caspian and Cassie had gotten spectacularly lost. They'd hurt each other deeply. They'd almost wasted the only real chance at happiness, but they found their way back. Not through magic or destiny, but through conscious and consistent choices. Through uncomfortable vulnerability and brutal honesty. Through deciding, daily, that love was worth the work. And in the end, that version of love, earned through effort and built on a foundation of previous failures, was infinitely stronger than easy perfection ever could be. It wasn't a perfect love story. It was a real love story, and it was absolutely enough.
And now I'm going to tell you some fun facts about this story that you might not have noticed. On Caspian and Cassie's first date, she laughed so hard at one of his jokes about financial consulting that she spit red wine on the waiter, a moment Caspian remembers fondly while she's in a coma. April was born during a severe storm that knocked out the entire hospital's power for hours, which is why someone handwrote April's miracle on her card, since Cassie's medical chances of getting pregnant naturally were very low. Vesper Webb is simultaneously Cassie's personal attorney and Caspian's longtime friend, which creates an interesting dynamic where he knows both sides of the story and is initially hostile toward Caspian despite their previous friendship. April's sleep battle before the first reconciliation kiss between Caspian and Cassie lasted exactly 45 minutes and involved 3 music changes and 2 position changes, showing the level of detail Caspian had developed as a father. April has a perfect physical combination of her parents. Caspian's dark hair, but Cassie's green eyes with golden flecks that only appear when the light hits at the right angle. Vesper's wedding gift card said, "Congratulations on finally getting it right, idiot." And Caspian proudly put it on the fridge instead of storing it away. April yelled, "Dada," for the first time exactly during Caspian and Cassie's second wedding kiss, loud enough to startle the nearby birds in the garden. Betty Ambrose eventually gained supervised access to April only once a month, with strict rules about permitted comments, showing that Caspian maintained boundaries even after she formally apologized. And if you want to watch another emotional video with a love story, click on the video that appears now on your screen and check it out.